y'all? It's Alicia, and I am so excited we are back. Welcome back to the Easy Podcast. Like I said, this is Alicia, and I'm really excited because I have the wonderful opportunity to be here with Melissa Rohlfs. And I have to let y'all know, Melissa and I have been in communication. It's since 2023, right? We were supposed to connect. Like, this is crazy town on my end, I will say. But I'm so glad we have this time now. We're actually connecting. This is beautiful. I'm really excited you're here. And I'm really excited for you guys to actually hear this conversation today because Melissa has actually taken the charge to help women and young girls in her coaching program. It's called Free to Be Coaching. And she is helping them with navigating food struggles. And she has her own story around food struggles as well. So I'm really excited that you're here today to share your story, and then also talk about like your program and how you help women and young women to actually manage their eating concerns. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here live and in person, Alicia.
Exactly. So, like I said, thank you so much again. And y'all, before we even hit record, I was sharing with Melissa, for those of you who might not know how I pay my bills, I'm a school nurse. And so we were talking about some of the things that I see with the girls that actually go to my school. So the school that I work at is K to 8th grade. And I was saying that in that middle school era, it seems like there is a shift with some of the girls and how they actually approach their eating during the school day. I can't say what they do when they go home, obviously, because I don't live with them. But, I see where it'll be like a group of girls or maybe one or two who are just doing their own thing, but they will then start restricting. And that would require, maybe just coming to my office to get some crackers. I always have saltines. Or, they'll say, they'll come to me very dizzy. I only had grapes today, because I'll ask them, like, have you eaten today? Whatever. And I wanted to just talk through just what that looks like for young women that you've actually coached, or what you know about how nutrition can be normalized in a way where it's not triggering young girls, especially starting at that age, to start restricting and finding healthier ways to manage their eating on a daily basis.
Yeah, I feel like this is such an interesting time. I've got a 13-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter myself, so we're kind of in that adolescent stage with our son. But I've been through it with our daughter, and I volunteer in the school a lot, so I'm there and I see and hear a lot of things. And I almost think, from what I'm hearing, is that it seems to start earlier, at least the comments. And this shocked me because this wasn't my experience, but from students at my kids' school were saying, they're making comments on bodies and body image in elementary. So it's almost like they've heard this messaging, and then they get to middle school and they're like, okay, now I need to do something about it. And so it's almost like you said, like that messaging is kind of added up, and the belief then becomes, okay, I need to lose weight. And in order to do that, I need to not eat food, which is not true. And I think part of that is because our society looks at food through the lens of weight. We don't necessarily look at it through the lens of health. Like for me, it was always food is either about gaining weight or losing weight. It wasn't about health and energy and my immune system and brain health and everything that food does for us. So I think if we could shift the messaging that nutrition affects every part of our well-being, physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, it's not just the weight, and we could teach our children that at a younger age, I think that would be a really great starting point. But how do we do that?
Right. And that is like, that was almost like a mind blown thing for me, because I think a lot of us grew up in that way where it was just food was either I'm eating this and I'm going to gain weight, or I'm eating this and the hope is I'll lose weight. And it's always, on the latter, like I'm hoping I'm losing weight and, whatever. Because I even think about myself growing up. I think about the women in my life. My aunt in particular, she was the queen of diets. Like, the cabbage soup diet. There was another diet where she was eating boiled eggs. And so it's like, watching these people, it's like, you're kind of like, it's almost like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How for adult women, I guess now that we're in this whole position, because we're the ones that are shaping these minds,
Yep.
and people they're modeling us, right?
Yep.
How do, I guess in your coaching, when you're
Yeah.
seeing this as we can go back to the kids in a minute, because I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, we're adults. We need to figure us, because honestly, it's us. Like we have to kind of
Yep. Yep.
start modeling this. But like
Yes.
for the women that are in your coaching,
Hmm.
do you see that that's kind of like where their actual origins began, like seeing the adult women in their lives and how they modeled their food practices, or like what does what do you find is like the common denominator with a lot of the people that you're coaching?
That is a piece of it. The other
Mhm.
piece is trauma. And they are
Mm,
using food to feel better, to try to escape, to numb, buffer stuff, to feel good. That's what I did. It's legal,
yeah.
socially acceptable, drug of choice. So I think those two things are a really big piece of the puzzle. It's what was modeled for them, it's what their mom did, and then there's the trauma piece. And those two together are kind of the perfect storm. And it's like you said, Alicia, like us as moms, we're the ones who are modeling that for our kids. And if we don't heal our relationship with food, and if we don't view food as a way to nourish and energize and fuel our bodies, we're not able to teach that to our kids. And I started working with moms originally because I wanted moms to get that vision for their families and to really pass it on to their daughters. But I saw this disconnect in
Mm,
that the moms were just viewing it as, no, I'm here to lose weight. I'm not really passing down what I'm sharing with my family because this is about me. Now, when I
mm.
work with the teenagers, they don't have that diet trauma. They don't have all of that programming and conditioning that us adults have. And so I think they're a little more receptive and a little bit more easy and malleable to work with in that sense.
That's interesting. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, I think it is something like if we can stop it right there, like I said, that eighth grade, so like 13,
Mhm.
14, and then
Yep.
up, kind of like capture them and, educate them on that nutrition
Yes.
component.
Yes.
Um, and then let them know that like eating is something that is for, our well-being, as
Mhm.
opposed to, like you said, stuffing it down with because of our trauma.
Yeah.
Um, we haven't talked about this, but that was something that was one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is
Yeah.
because my eating concerns were typically around the traumatic events that
Mhm.
happened in my life. And so I couldn't understand. I was like, why can't I get it together?
Yep.
Like, what is the deal? Like, why? Because I would joke, I would say, oh, I just love food. Like
Mhm.
that's just my thing. And, everyone's story as it relates to food and trauma are all different. Mine was I would overeat,
Yep.
binge and all the things. Right? Just like, right. And so I guess all that to bring it back to the idea of adult women modeling for their kids. Are you seeing that the women that are actually in your program, or just in general, maybe just by research or whatever, the ones that do have younger daughters,
Mhm.
are they open to bringing their daughters into the coaching program with them to work together? And if so, like, how does that work?
They have not been, but I also
Okay.
haven't offered it.
Okay.
And that's what's been kind of interesting is the mom is very much on her own journey and she has daughters and she has children. And we talk about that. We're like, you're passing this on to your daughter. More is caught than
Mm,
taught. You're not saying, don't eat this, don't eat that, but you're modeling that. They're picking up on the way you talk about food, the way you talk about your body, what you're eating, how you're taking care of yourself. Like they are picking up on that.
right.
So, yeah.
Wow. And and the reason why I asked that, because it's like I know when I started actually addressing my eating concerns, there
Hmm.
was so much shame around it.
Hmm.
And regardless of what I thought I was hiding from my daughter, because I have a 16-year-old daughter, I know that was it's there. Like she sees my behaviors, it's
Hmm.
already modeled, it's
Yeah.
set in stone. And we actually had a conversation about it. And I was just saying, I want to ensure that I'm doing my best as it relates to the eating concerns,
Hmm.
and not trying to expose you to my habits. And she
Hmm.
basically told me, she's like, Mom, it's too late. Like, like I've seen it. And it was like, in a way it was heartbreaking, but in the way it was, I guess like a relief in a way, because it's like,
Yes.
okay, I'm busted, but in a good way. It's like
Mhm.
now I have to be more accountable than before, because I was thinking that it was all like I was the only one with the secret. But she was like, "Girl, I already knew about yourself. Like, like save yourself."
They usually do.
Right. And it's just wild in that way. But I wanted to then also circle to how you got into this
Mhm.
world of coaching.
Mhm.
I know you said you have your stories around trauma
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
eating and everything. Was it because of your particular story that
Mhm.
you got into coaching? Okay.
Yeah, it was. So kind of like my defining moment, if you will. And it's so funny because I remember being like an 8-year-old little girl and hiding Pop-Tarts and cookies and candies and
Mhm.
all sorts of, sugary treats in my room. And I think had the mice not come in and pooped on my bed and told on me, my parents would never have known. But those dang
Wow.
mice ratted me out. Um,
Right.
so it started in childhood and then it
Mm.
carried. And I think really once I got married, had kids, our son was a newborn. He wasn't sleeping through the night. So I was exhausted. Our daughter had some undiagnosed food allergies and sensory processing disorder we didn't know about.
Mhm.
Husband was traveling from work. So I'm like, I'm going to go to a life coach because I really am struggling as a mom and I'm exhausted and feel like I'm just covered in poop and puke all day. And I
Right.
have a college degree and I should be doing more. So went to a coach who was also a therapist who had her own trauma and PTSD diagnosis. And through our coaching, she was like, I think you might have some PTSD from childhood trauma. So we switched from
Mm.
coaching to therapy. I went to a naturopath and learned about vitamins and minerals and supplementation and really supporting the body. And that's what led me on this journey to become a coach because it wasn't a diet, it wasn't a pill, it wasn't a patch, it wasn't a wrap. And yes, I did lose weight, but people were so fixated on that. And it was like, no, this is about like overall health and feeling good and being energetic and not curled up in fetal position when my husband gets home from work because I'm exhausted at the end of the day and just really being who I wanted to be in the world.
And I love it. I love the idea of coaching, period,
Mhm.
because being someone who actually did all like if there was a diet to be had,
Yeah.
I actually was on it. Weight Watchers, like you name it, like I did it. But it was like it was just such a different experience when, like you said, the whole coaching component versus actually using some type of program to quote unquote solve the weight loss problem. And it's like for me, because I've gone through coaching as well, it is something that's always on my mind in a way that I'm being more mindful of my choices as opposed to judging myself.
Totally. And that's huge.
Yeah. And
Because
oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for those of us that have the trauma and we have that shame and guilt that you talked about, the last thing we need is to pour judgment on ourselves because we're already
Hmm.
doing that anyway. So when we can replace that judgment with curiosity and really ask, why am I doing this? What's going on? What do I need? That's really powerful and that's really
Mm.
liberating. And I think that's what coaching did for me. It taught me to replace judgment with curiosity.
And that's it. It's the being curious about
Mhm.
ourselves because
Yeah.
and you can let me know if you experience this as well with with your actual coaching and when you were
Mhm.
coached. And I still feel like coaching is something we all need through.
Yes.
It's like just the lifelong journey of us, figuring out this thing called life. But I feel like with coaching in general, like you said, that curiosity component comes in, but it's also this idea of learning yourself because I feel like I didn't know myself until I really started doing the work in the coaching program that I was in at the time. I mean, do you find that people and even yourself, like you started really learning more about who you were and what you needed as opposed to like external factors, if that makes sense?
100% because I didn't know that the reason I was eating that food when I was 8 was because I didn't know what I needed and I didn't know how to
Mm.
articulate my needs. I had no idea that's what I was doing. But it's like you said, it's this journey of getting to know yourself and learning to really trust yourself. It's really, I think for me, it was connecting to my body and saying, okay, I am physically hungry, so let's nourish myself instead of, okay, I feel hungry, I'm just going to go eat some Oreos to feel better. And really just this journey of self discovery.
Mm. Yeah. And I think for some people, well, I shouldn't say some people. I will say Alicia because listen, I'm on the journey, right? I think it was a scary thing for me when I started a coaching program because it was like, oh, I don't know myself. Like seriously, like
Mhm.
I don't know what I like. I don't know because I've always looked to some type of, like I said, external,
External. Mhm.
resource or whatever. And it's like for people that are being coached or that you've coached in the past, what is the best approach when it comes to that? Like
Mhm.
really like honing in on who you are, because it could be like I would say for me, like I said, it was overwhelming for me to step into, trust. Like you said before, trusting yourself. Like, where does that come into the coaching? Is that something that's initial, or is that something that's gradually kind of like put in place? If that makes sense.
I think it's gradual, because I think you've got somebody, I mean, I'll speak for myself, who doesn't know themselves at all. And they've just kind of, I talk about this in my book. I was a chameleon. I put on whatever face people wanted me to be. It was like, oh, you want me to be happy? Sure, I'm happy. You want me to be sad? I'll be. Like, I didn't know who I was. And so I think to start there, it has to be gradual, because it's this like slow peeling away of the onion. Like, you've got to really get to the layers. And like you said, I was so focused on the external to find that validation or that worth or that identity or whatever that was, that to really go inward was totally foreign and overwhelming and a little bit concerning.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of going back when it comes to like the adolescent child.
Yeah.
Because you were saying the trauma is not really so much the issue with them, but as it relates to them being coached and learning themselves, do you feel like the adolescent girl, like that they have a better sense of who they are? Are they still developing that piece? And with that, are they easier in the coaching process as opposed to an old fart like me?
I think they're easier, honestly, because I think that generation has more tools, they have more resources, they have way more, learning how to connect to themselves, their bodies, with their thoughts. They have, I think social media actually can be very good for them, because it gives them a place to share their voice, and others come alongside and agree. And so they're not fearful of, oh my gosh, I'm saying this and they're going to judge me, or they're going to disown me, or they're going to not be my friend anymore, or whatever. So I almost feel like it's easier because they are more connected and in tune with who they are than I ever was at that age. I can only speak from my own experience, but that's been interesting.
Yeah. And when you were saying it, was like, yeah, that is true. Because even when I think about my daughter, like I said, she's 16, and the like self-advocacy that she has, it's just, I was like, I would have never, it's so refreshing. At times it's like I worry, about like, oh my gosh, she's going against the grain as it relates to like friend groups or whatever. But it's like, you want that. And if they're her friends, they're still going to be around like, oh, she just doesn't want to do that. That's fine. Or she's not into it, whatever,
Yes.
I was never put in a position to even know that I could advocate for myself, which I think leads to a lot of, I'm 45. So I think a lot of women at this age is like standing up for ourselves and saying, like I said, going for a coaching, because I need to figure out how to, one, stand up for myself and also take care of myself.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes there can be that stigma, I don't know about you, but I remember hearing like, oh, well, she's really assertive, she must be a BI. And it's like, we have labeled and judged and grouped together, like if someone is, an advocate for themselves and they're assertive, instead of admiring that in them and acknowledging the leader that they are, they've gotten this bad or label that they don't want. And so we shy away from that. That's what I did. Like, I didn't want to be assertive because I didn't want to be seen that way.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is too with myself. Like, I just played small for the majority of my life. Let's be serious, because I just didn't want to take up so much space. One, because I was a heavier person. And two, it's like, who do I think I am? Like, I just need to just fall in line. Don't cause me problems. So it's like, to be in that position so young, I think it's beautiful to see, younger children or just girls in general, following that actual path of like, this is who I am, and I'm building on that, as opposed to me trying to figure it out right now.
Absolutely. Or not leaning into who they really are.
Yeah. And it's just, for me, like I said, I'm just so grateful to see the young girls that are actually stepping into their own and actually like being, who they are. I mean, obviously we're still growing and learning, but it's beautiful in that way. But also I wanted to just say, in terms of nutrition, for girls that, like I was saying before, that are in those positions where they're worried about the weight gain. I know we kind of talked about like, incorporating that nutrition and making sure, that we're focusing on that. But for someone who's like, okay, what is nutritious? how do we work? And well, not so much work, but where does someone start with that? Because we could look at diet soda, or we could, some
Yeah.
people that seems healthy to them. Like,
Yeah.
so where do we find ways to like incorporate actual whole foods and things that are a bit more less processed in the diet for like young and even older women in general?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think that's the baseline is, the less processed food. Our bodies weren't designed to handle those preservatives and chemicals and everything they've added to the food today. So I think, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, meats, like food in its most natural form is always a great starting point. But that's hard with picky eaters and kids who don't want to eat their vegetables. So you can sneak things in. I'm a big proponent of putting spinach in smoothies. It blends really well. You can't really see it. You can't taste it. That's a great way to get it in. You can also grind up vegetables and put them in muffins. And there's a really good sweet potato brownie recipe I love. So there are ways to get creative and sneak it in. And I think sometimes you have to do that. But I think too, with kids, one thing I learned in my nutrition certification for kids is get them involved in the process. Like let them have some ownership and say, and this is what we're going to have for dinner. We're going to go to the store. You can pick out the vegetables, you can pick out the fruit, and then you make it together and it becomes an experience. They're more likely to be involved and connected to it instead of, oh, my mom's making me eat green beans again, or whatever the case may be.
Right. I love that. I love the idea of incorporating the kids as well, because I grew up with my mom and just the women in my family. We weren't allowed really in the kitchen. It was kind of like whatever. And so I think that's so important, because it's like even just learning just how to cook, right? So it's nice that that is something that should be promoted more for kids beyond the nutrition. Nutrition obviously being one of the most important, but also just learning how to like cook. Because I knew how to cook going to college, but I remember seeing some kids, they were like, what? They had no idea. So I think it's probably helpful in that way as well.
Absolutely. And I think too, like helping kids, I think a really good question to ask them is, what foods make you feel good? And I think that's part of the disconnect with our bodies is we don't know how foods make us feel. So getting curious about that, when you eat vegetables and fruits, how do you feel compared to when you eat candy and lots of foods with sugar? Do you notice a difference? They're probably going to say this tastes better and I feel better initially, but they're going to have a mood swing because it's going to affect the blood sugar and it's going to affect the mood eventually. And so I think helping them understand how foods make them feel can also be helpful.
That is so smart, because growing up, and what we were taught was like, don't eat that because it's bad, or it's too much sugar, you're gonna get cavities, as opposed to taking ownership of it as an individual thing. Like, okay, do I feel good when I'm eating it? I love that, because for especially like adolescent kids and even some younger kids, depending on where they are developmentally, if you tell them no, they're going to push even harder. And just adults and anybody, really, if you think about it, the more you say no, you're tempted to want those things,
Where the mind goes, the man follows. So no, it's like, oh, here I go.
Right. That is a really good point, because it also gives the child that sense of, oh, I can say, I have a say in this whole situation as well.
Absolutely. And I think too, with dinner time, like I always envision like, okay, we're all going to sit down. We're going to have this lovely, meal. Everybody's going to like what I cook. That never happens. Right. And I think too, the other part with that is letting kids honor their hunger and fullness. So a lot of times our son isn't hungry when we eat dinner. So he'll sit with us, he'll engage in the conversation, and then he'll eat his dinner maybe a little later because he's not hungry. I'm not going to force him to eat if he's not hungry, because that's when I think we need to all be together.
That's another one. Seriously, because growing up, everyone had to eat at a certain time.
Yeah.
And in my household, if you didn't eat at that time, it was almost disrespectful. And never knew about honoring my body and like listening to those hunger cues, and when I'm actually full. That was the big one. Like there was no conversation or even language around how you do it. And I love that we are now in a space where we can actually talk about that and even just implement it, because I was a part of the empty plate club. You had everything on the plate, right? Regardless of if I felt like I was going to explode, I
Yes.
had to eat it all.
Yes. 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 And I think too, like, it helps them to connect to their bodies. It gives them a voice. It helps them to kind of advocate for themselves, which as they grow up and grow older and get into situations, they might need that.
Mm, yeah, that is so true. And it's because, like I said, and I mean, it's very apparent that you need it because I never had a shut off.
Yeah.
I just didn't, especially when it came to sugar. Like I
Yeah.
could eat sugar until the cows came home,
Mm-hmm.
and just was not, and I never had the opportunity to practice
Yeah.
listening to my body.
Yeah. You probably didn't even know that phrase. I didn't know that phrase, so I became a coach. Like that was part of my training. It's like, what? Okay, cool.
Right, right. And it's just like, oh, I'm supposed to listen to myself. Oh, that's a thing. Okay,
Yeah.
here we are.
Yep.
Seriously. Oh my goodness. So for those that are interested in working with you, what are some of the things that you encourage a client to be prepared for? Because it's one thing to say, "Oh, I want to be coached,"
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
are you coachable? Right? Like so,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so for someone that's coming into the curiosity of possibly being coached,
Mhm.
what are some things that they should prepare themselves for a coaching actual um, program? I couldn't think of the word.
Yeah. Yeah, you're good. I think just come with an openness and a receptiveness. I think it's what I love about coaching is it's asking questions. Like you are the own best expert in you. It's not me. My job as a coach is to come alongside you and ask questions and pull out what's in there so that you know what's in there and what's going on. And so it's really a beautiful journey of self-discovery with someone just guiding you and asking you questions and you answer because it's you.
Right, right.
No right or wrong.
And that's one thing that I do love about coaching is that pulling the judgment out
Yeah.
and going on this journey of exploration of who you are, how you tick, and what actually works for you. It's such a beautiful experience. And I think if more people knew about coaching,
Yeah.
the lives that would be transformed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is such a beautiful experience. Um, so free to be coaching.
Mm-hmm.
What's on the horizon for free to be coaching at this time?
That is a good question. I don't know because I have lots of ideas, Alicia, and I have
Yeah,
lots of visions. And it's like,
right,
okay, wait, how do I make this happen? So
right.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Somebody suggested today mother-daughter retreats, and I'm like, oh, okay. Let me sit on that for a while.
I think that would be beautiful because I think in some ways that would, like I said before, like where it wouldn't be like an actual coaching um, program that they're going through together. The retreat, well, I mean, could then implement it later on, but the retreat would kind of be the landing spot, right? It's like, okay, here we are, maybe in some beautiful place, and experiencing, what it's like to manage our food, you know, concerns in a space where we are enjoying whatever, scenery or whatever. And then also creating an environment where these women and their children can kind of connect in a way that they've never connected before. I think that's great, Melissa. Serious.
Oh, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. So, listen, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. But
Thank
for
you.
those, oh, yes, you're welcome. For those who would be interested in working with you, where can they find you? Any socials, websites? Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, my website is free, the number two, the letter B, coaching.com. So freetobecoaching.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and you can find all those spots on the website. That's the main hub.
Main hub. So I will share the main hub, the website,
Perfect.
in the show notes, so everyone will have an opportunity to find you on all the different platforms. Pinterest is like the place now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you experiencing like a lot of cool things there?
Yeah, and I love it because it's evergreen. So it's not like Facebook and Instagram where it just is so quick to vanish. Like it's a search engine. So things that you put there years ago are still relevant.
It's such a cool spot. Like I'm now learning how to like utilize it. So, wow, that's so random. I said that, but the point of it is like it's a really cool place.
And
like
teenagers are using it. My daughter's on there. She's like getting she's got a prom board. She's got a birthday. Like it is the place if kids are there.
That is exactly right. Wherever the kids are, it's like, okay, this must be the new trend. Seriously.
Yep.
I'm always looking to my daughter for like all types of ideas. I'm like, so what's the next cool thing? Please tell me.
Yes, help me out here. Help them on out.
Right. Melissa, thank you so much again for being on the podcast. I'm so glad we finally got to connect. I was like, this is Alicia, get it together. This is ridiculous. But thank you so much.
You have it together. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we connected.
Yes. And y'all, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Eat Me podcast. I'll see y'all next week. Thank you so much, Melissa. This was awesome.
Thank you.